What happens when a beloved talk show host pushes too far and a royal guest decides he's had enough? You won't believe what unfolds when Prince Harry sits down with Kelly Clarkson for what was supposed to be a promotional appearance that turned into one of the most explosive confrontations in daytime television history. The tension was palpable from the moment the camera started rolling, but nobody could have predicted the nuclear meltdown that was about to tear through Studio 6B. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when two of the most outspoken personalities in entertainment go head-to-head in a battle of wills that left the entire studio audience in stunned silence. Last night's episode of The Kelly Clarkson Show was supposed to be a straightforward promotional appearance for Prince Harry's upcoming memoir sequel, but what viewers witnessed instead was a masterclass in how quickly things can spiral completely out of control when egos clash and boundaries are crossed. The warning signs were there from the very beginning, but nobody in that studio could have anticipated just how far things would go. Kelly Clarkson, known for her warm and bubbly personality, seemed unusually tense as she introduced her guest. Her trademark smile appeared forced, and there was something in her eyes that suggested she had an agenda beyond the typical celebrity chat. Prince Harry, dressed in a navy blue suit and looking every bit the polished royal despite his years of rebellion against the institution, walked onto the set with his usual confident stride. But those who know him well might have noticed the slight tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw was set just a fraction too tight. The trouble began almost immediately during what should have been harmless small talk. Kelly, leaning forward in her chair with that deceptively sweet smile, started with what seemed like an innocent question about Harry's recent trip to the UK. "So Harry, I have to ask about your recent visit to London. There's been a lot of speculation about whether you actually spent time with your father during his health struggles, or if that was just another publicity stunt." The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Prince Harry's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, but the camera caught it, that flash of something darker behind his eyes. He maintained his composure, but his voice carried a slight edge when he responded. "Kelly, I think there's been a lot of misinformation floating around about my personal family matters. I've always been very clear that my relationship with my family is complicated, but when it comes to my father's health, that's not something I use for publicity." Kelly wasn't backing down. If anything, she seemed emboldened by his measured response. "But Harry, you have to understand why people are skeptical. You've written a book. You've done multiple interviews. You've essentially built a career on sharing family secrets. Can you really blame people for questioning your motives when you suddenly show up claiming to be the concerned son?" The studio audience, which had been quietly watching this exchange, began to sense something was off. This wasn't the typical Kelly Clarkson interview style. She was known for being empathetic, for making her guests feel comfortable, not for launching what felt increasingly like an attack. But Kelly seemed determined to push forward, her questions becoming more pointed, more personal. Prince Harry shifted in his seat, his media training kicking in as he tried to navigate the increasingly hostile waters. "I think what's important to remember, Kelly, is that despite everything that's happened publicly, these are still my family members. When someone you care about is going through a health crisis, you put aside your differences. That's what normal people do." The emphasis on normal people didn't go unnoticed. Kelly's smile became even more strained, and there was a flash of something, irritation, anger, that crossed her face. "Normal people, Harry? Is that what you think you are? Because normal people don't usually have the luxury of airing their family's dirty laundry on a global platform and then expecting everyone to believe they're acting out of genuine concern." The temperature in the studio seemed to drop several degrees. Prince Harry's publicist, sitting in the front row, looked visibly uncomfortable and was making subtle gestures to the producers. But Kelly was on a roll now, and she wasn't about to let this opportunity slip away. "I mean, let's be honest here," Kelly continued, her voice taking on a more confrontational tone. "You've spent years trashing your family, your country, the institution that made you who you are. You've accused them of racism, of neglect, of all sorts of terrible things. And now you want us to believe that you're just a loving son who's concerned about his father? Prince Harry's jaw clenched visibly. His hands, which had been resting casually on his knee, now gripped the armrest of his chair. Kelly, I think you're mischaracterizing a lot of what I've said. I've never trashed my family. I've shared my truth about my experiences, which is something I have every right to do. And yes, despite our differences, I love my father and I was genuinely concerned about his health. But Kelly wasn't finished. She leaned back in her chair, adopting a more casual pose that somehow made her next words even more cutting. Your truth, Harry? That's interesting. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like your truth has been pretty profitable. Book deals, Netflix documentaries, speaking engagements. You've monetized your family trauma pretty effectively. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Prince Harry's composure began to crack, and for the first time in the interview, real anger flashed across his features. Are you seriously suggesting that I've exploited my own trauma for money? That's incredibly insulting, Kelly. I've been open about my struggles because I believe it helps other people who are going through similar experiences. Kelly shrugged, a gesture that seemed almost dismissive. I'm just saying what a lot of people are thinking. You left the royal family because you wanted privacy, but then you've done nothing but talk about them publicly ever since. It's hard to reconcile those two things. The studio audience was now completely silent, sensing that they were witnessing something unprecedented. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was a real confrontation unfolding in real time, and everyone in the room could feel the tension building to a breaking point. Prince Harry leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. Kelly, I think you need to be very careful about the assumptions you're making. You don't know what my family has been through, what we've had to deal with, what led to the decisions we made. But Kelly, perhaps sensing blood in the water, pressed on. Oh, I think we all know exactly what you've been through, Harry. You've told us, repeatedly, in great detail. What I'm questioning is whether all this public soul-bearing is really about healing and helping others, or if it's just another way to stay relevant now that you're no longer a working royal. The words hung in the air like a challenge, and everyone in the studio held their breath, waiting to see how Prince Harry would respond. The cameras captured every micro-expression, every subtle shift in body language, as the tension built to an almost unbearable level. What happened next would change everything, and nobody in that studio was prepared for the verbal explosion that was about to erupt. Prince Harry's eyes narrowed dangerously as he processed Kelly's accusation about staying relevant. The mask of royal composure he'd worn throughout his life was beginning to slip, and everyone in the studio could see it happening in real time. His voice, when he finally spoke, carried a cold fury that made the temperature in the room seem to drop another 10 degrees. Staying relevant? Harry repeated, his British accent becoming more pronounced as his anger mounted. Kelly, you have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. You think this is about relevance? You think I enjoy having my private family matters dissected by strangers? You think I wanted any of this? Kelly, perhaps realizing she'd struck a nerve, should have backed down. Instead, she doubled down with a reckless confidence that would prove to be her undoing. Well, Harry, if you didn't want it dissected, maybe you shouldn't have put it all out there in the first place. You can't have it both ways. You can't sell your story and then complain when people have opinions about it. The studio audience collectively held its breath. Several producers in the wings were making frantic hand signals, clearly wanting to cut to commercial, but Kelly seemed oblivious to everything except her determination to push this confrontation to its absolute limit. Prince Harry stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor with a sound that seemed to echo through the stunned silence. You know what, Kelly? I came here tonight thinking I was going to have a civilized conversation with someone I respected. Clearly, I was wrong about that. Kelly's eyes widened slightly, but she wasn't backing down. If anything, she seemed energized by his reaction. Oh, so now I'm the bad guy because I'm asking the tough questions that everyone else is too polite to ask? Someone needs to call you out on your hypocrisy, Harry. Hypocrisy? Harry's voice rose for the first time, and the raw emotion in it was unmistakable. You want to talk about hypocrisy? Let's talk about how you've built your entire career on being the relatable celebrity, the one who understands struggle and pain. But here you are, attacking someone for sharing their truth about trauma and mental health struggles. Where's your empathy now, Kelly? The accusation hit its mark. Kelly's carefully constructed persona began to crack, and for the first time in the interview, she looked genuinely rattled. Don't you dare turn this around on me. I've never monetized my family's private business the way you have. Haven't you? Harry shot back, his composure completely gone now. What about every time you've talked about your divorce on air? What about the songs you've written about your relationships? What about the stories you've shared about your childhood? How is that any different from what I've done? Kelly's face flushed red, and her voice became shrill. Because I'm not destroying my family in the process. I'm not accusing them of racism and neglect on a global platform. And there it is, Harry said, his voice deadly quiet now. That's what this is really about, isn't it? You don't like that I dared to speak up about the racism my wife faced. You don't like that I exposed the ugly truth about an institution that people like you prefer to see as some fairy tale. The studio erupted in murmurs and whispers. This was no longer a talk show interview. This was a full-scale character assassination attempt, and everyone present could feel the weight of what was happening. Kelly's mask had completely slipped now, revealing something ugly underneath. Your wife knew what she was getting into when she married into the royal family. She knew the scrutiny that came with it. But instead of handling it with grace, she played the victim and dragged you down with her. The moment those words left Kelly's mouth, the entire studio seemed to freeze. Even the camera operators looked shocked. Prince Harry's face went through a series of emotions: shock, disbelief, and then pure rage. How dare you, he said, his voice shaking with fury. How dare you attack my wife? She did nothing wrong except fall in love with the wrong person. She endured things that no human being should have to endure, and she did it with more grace than you're showing right now. Kelly, perhaps realizing she'd gone too far, tried to backtrack. Harry, I'm not attacking anyone. I'm just pointing out that... No, Harry cut her off, his voice like a whip crack. You don't get to backtrack now. You've shown your true colors, Kelly. You've shown exactly what kind of person you really are. And it's ugly. The studio audience was completely silent now, transfixed by the spectacle unfolding before them. Several people in the front row looked visibly uncomfortable, and at least one person appeared to be filming with their phone despite the no-recording policy. Kelly's desperation was becoming obvious as she realized how badly this had gone wrong. Harry, please, let's just calm down and... Calm down? Harry's laugh was bitter and humorless. You spend the last 20 minutes attacking my character, my motives, my family, and my wife, and now you want me to calm down? You've got some nerve, Kelly. The producers were frantically trying to get Kelly's attention, making cutting gestures and pointing toward the commercial break button, but Kelly seemed determined to salvage something from this disaster. Look, Harry, I think we've both said things we might regret. Maybe we should just... The only thing I regret, Harry interrupted, is agreeing to come on this show. I thought you were different, Kelly. I thought you were someone who understood what it meant to overcome adversity, to fight for what's right. But you're just another person who's more interested in tearing people down than building them up. Kelly's face was now flushed with embarrassment and anger. I'm not trying to tear anyone down. I'm trying to get to the truth. The truth? Harry's voice dripped with disdain. The truth is that you're a bully hiding behind a microphone. The truth is that you've used your platform tonight to attack someone who's already been through more than you could possibly imagine. The truth is that you've shown your audience exactly what kind of person you really are. The words hit like physical blows, and Kelly visibly recoiled. Her media training kicked in, and she tried one last desperate attempt to regain control. Harry, I think you're being overly sensitive. These are questions that need to be asked. Overly sensitive? Harry's voice rose again, and this time there was no mistaking the rage behind it. You attack my wife. You question my love for my father. You accuse me of exploiting my own trauma, and I'm being overly sensitive. You're delusional, Kelly. The studio was electric with tension now. Everyone could sense that this was building to something explosive, something that would be talked about for years to come. The cameras continued to roll, capturing every moment of this unprecedented meltdown. Kelly, realizing she was losing control completely, made one final, fatal mistake. Maybe if you spent less time playing the victim and more time taking responsibility for your actions, people would have more sympathy for you. The words hung in the air like a death sentence, and everyone in the studio knew that Kelly had just crossed a line from which there was no return. Prince Harry's face went completely white, and then red with fury. The explosion that followed would be unlike anything daytime television had ever seen. Playing the victim? Harry's voice was deadly quiet, the calm before the storm. You think I'm playing the victim? Let me tell you something, Kelly. I watched my mother die because of people like you. I watched the media destroy her, tear her apart piece by piece, until she couldn't take it anymore. And now you're sitting here, using your platform to do the exact same thing to me and my family. The studio was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Kelly's face had gone pale, and for the first time since the interview started, she looked genuinely frightened by what she had unleashed. Harry, I never, she began, but he cut her off with a gesture that was pure royal authority. No, you don't get to speak now. You've said quite enough. Harry's voice was shaking with rage, but every word was crystal clear. You want to talk about taking responsibility? Let's talk about your responsibility. You have a platform that reaches millions of people, and you've chosen to use it tonight to bully and attack someone who came here in good faith. Kelly tried to interrupt again, but Harry wasn't finished. The floodgates had opened, and years of frustration and anger came pouring out. You want to know what playing the victim looks like? It looks like someone who builds their entire career on being the underdog, the relatable star who overcame adversity, and then uses that platform to tear down someone else who's trying to do the same thing. That's what a victim looks like, Kelly. That's what you are. The camera captured every moment of Kelly's mounting panic. Her producers were frantically trying to cut to commercial, but she waved them off, seemingly determined to see this through to its bitter end. You think you're so much better than me? Kelly shot back, her voice cracking with desperation. You think because you were born into privilege, because you had a title that makes you special, you're nothing without that family you claim to hate so much. If Kelly thought this would wound Harry, she was wrong. Instead, it seemed to focus his anger into something even more dangerous. There it is, he said, his voice deadly calm. The real Kelly Clarkson, not the sweet, understanding host you pretend to be. You're jealous. You're jealous that despite everything I've been through, despite losing my mother, despite the trauma, despite walking away from everything I knew, I still have something you'll never have. And what's that? Kelly spat. Authenticity, Harry replied without hesitation. I've never pretended to be perfect. I've never claimed to have all the answers. But I've been honest about my struggles, about my mistakes, about my pain. You're performing. You're playing a character, and tonight, the mask slipped. The studio audience was witnessing something unprecedented. Several people were openly recording now, despite security's attempts to stop them. This was television history in the making, and everyone knew it. Kelly's voice became shrill with desperation. You want to talk about authenticity? You abandoned your grandmother in her final years? You missed her funeral because you were too busy making Netflix deals. The accusation was a lie, and everyone in the studio knew it. Harry had attended the Queen's funeral, but Kelly was beyond caring about facts now. She was in full attack mode, throwing anything she could think of. Harry's response was swift and brutal. How dare you lie about my grandmother? How dare you use her memory as a weapon against me? You're despicable, Kelly. You're everything that's wrong with celebrity culture, with media culture, with this toxic need to destroy people for entertainment. The studio erupted in murmurs and gasps. Several audience members were shaking their heads in disgust, clearly appalled by Kelly's behavior. You want to know what the difference is between us? Harry continued, his voice gaining strength. When I make mistakes, I own them. When I hurt people, I apologize. When I'm wrong, I admit it. But you're going to go home tonight, And you're going to tell yourself that you were just doing your job, that you were asking the tough questions. You're going to justify this disgusting display because the alternative is admitting that you're a bully. Kelly's face was now streaked with tears, but whether they were from genuine emotion or frustration was impossible to tell. "You don't know anything about me," she whispered. "I know enough," Harry replied coldly. "I know that you had a choice tonight. You could have used your platform to have a meaningful conversation about mental health, about family, about overcoming adversity. Instead, you chose to attack. You chose to try to tear me down. And why? For ratings, for clicks, for the thrill of making someone else suffer." The studio was completely silent now. Even the camera operator seemed transfixed by the raw emotion on display. Harry stood up, his full height imposing as he looked down at Kelly. "You know what the saddest part is? I actually respected you. I thought you were different from the rest of them. I thought you understood what it meant to fight for something better. But you're just another person who's more interested in tearing people down than building them up." Kelly tried one last desperate attempt to salvage something from this disaster. "Harry, please, I think we've both—" "No," Harry cut her off with finality. "We haven't both done anything. You did this. You chose this. And now you get to live with the consequences." He began removing his microphone, his movements deliberate and final. The studio audience watched in stunned silence as he carefully unclipped the device and set it down on the coffee table between them. "You want to know what taking responsibility looks like?" Harry asked, his voice carrying to every corner of the studio. "It looks like walking away when someone shows you who they really are. It looks like refusing to participate in someone else's toxic behavior. It looks like having enough self-respect to say, 'Enough.'" Kelly's voice was barely a whisper now. "Harry, please don't go. We can fix this." Harry looked at her with something that might have been pity. "There's nothing to fix, Kelly. This is who you are. This is what you chose to be tonight. And I refuse to be part of it any longer." The silence in the studio was deafening as Harry turned his back on Kelly and began walking toward the exit. His stride was confident, purposeful, every inch the prince he had been born to be. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harry called out to the audience without turning around, "I apologize that you had to witness this. You deserve better than what you saw here tonight. You all deserve better." With that, Prince Harry walked off the set, leaving behind a stunned studio audience, a devastated host, and what would become one of the most talked-about moments in television history. Kelly Clarkson sat alone at her desk, tears streaming down her face, finally understanding the full weight of what she had done. The cameras continued to roll, capturing every moment of her breakdown, until finally, mercifully, someone had the decency to call for commercial break. But the damage was done. The mask had slipped, and there was no going back. As the credits rolled on what would be Kelly's final show, everyone in that studio knew they had witnessed something extraordinary, not just a celebrity meltdown, but a moment of raw human truth that would be remembered long after the cameras stopped rolling.